I would say there were two, and this is beyond just my service, it's extending from when we used to go watch city council meetings. But housing has always been something that we had to concern ourselves with, and it has a lot to do with the financial status of the city and the financial status of the community where we are. And so that, in our case, unfortunately gone up some, but you can't count on that, and you need to have some fallback kinds of positions for housing especially, and transportation as well. So what I think I remember during the time that I served is that we were talking about housing and trying to figure out a way to do low-income, affordable housing. I don't think we ever got there, but I think it continues to be an aspirational goal for the city, and it's an aspirational goal for all the communities, I would say, up and down the coastline. Also, I remember vividly when several people were hurt on the bicycles on 101, and that brought about some talk about, well, we need to have a pathway for bicycles. Bicycles are going to be a permanent kind of group in our community, and so how to go about that, paint lines, not paint lines, have edges, not have edges, all of those. I mean, they're minor details, but they matter a lot, could matter a lot for the life of somebody riding a bicycle. So the transportation, I think, and housing would cross all those lines.
Well, I'd be glad to think about the transportation issue particularly. When we first became a city, we had some real issues about transportation. The railroad for one, and the roadway for the other. Both of those had their challenges. Undergrounding the train tracks down so they didn't disrupt traffic in the town was a big issue. And Joe remembers this really well because he was at the big meeting I had to attend where they were divvying out the finances for the coming year and what to study. And our Great Separation project had to happen. And I was going to that meeting, and the night before I called Joe and said, "Joe, what are you doing tomorrow?" He said, "No, what do you need?" I said, "Well, there's a big meeting coming up, and I think I'd like to have another elected official with me, if you can make it." And he said, "Sure." So we both went up on the train with Sandag, went to this big meeting up in Orange County, and we fought and fought until we got the funds for that Great Separation.
Well, I think that the inauguration was in 1995, was the first train that ran very, very early in the morning, by the way. My little daughter, who's now 40 years old, and I got up very early and went over there and waited for that first train to come down the tracks in 1995. So
Okay.
That's when it started. Operation.
Right.
Now, the planning we're going to talk about,
Right.
but
Yeah, getting
that took some time and effort, and I'd like to talk about that also.
Well, it was a huge project for the city, and it was kind of the envy of many other cities to have Great Separation. We weren't the only one who wanted it. And digging that trench down and lowering those tracks and having to change a lot of sewer lines and God knows what else was a major feat. Fortunately, they picked a really good contractor, and things went very smoothly, mostly at night. And lo and behold, boom, 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 suddenly we had tracks below grade.
Boom, boom, boom was actually in 1999 is when September 17th, I believe, that we opened it back up again, and the Great Separation was complete. The big dig, we called it. It was something that was going to change the city forever. It was a regional transportation center, so not only did we have the coaster come down the line, which I worked quite hard on. I was on the NCTD board, North County Transit Board, and ended up being the chairman of that for a couple of terms, and then I was the head of transportation for Sandag in their transportation committee. I was the chair for 4.5 years, so I had a lot going on with regard to our project. And you could be assured we made that and had that in the forefront, and Marion is right. I went up with her in to Orange County. We also had federal funds that we had to get, and I secured those through Sandag and going over there to really lobby for those funds. But it was a combination of local, state, and federal funds that made that happen at $20 million. To do that again today, you're looking at over $100 million.
If there was an emergency, and the train kept stopping all the time there, you couldn't get the emergency vehicles around. That was number one, I think, a safety factor for the city. It was just really traffic. It held up everything. And we loved it having the train here. It's been there forever. But it needed to go down. It needed to be lower there. And that was a logical place for it. And that's why we pushed on it really hard. And today it's like taken for granted. But it was a real traffic stopper before.
I have a real good recollection of what happened. Number one, they promised the council that if you take the train station and have it here, which would become a regional transportation center, we will give you grade separation, okay? And by the way, I want to be, and I showed Kelly, I think you saw it, that I was against the train coming into Solana Beach because of the impacts of the community, okay? And Marion, I know, was also. But if you look at my brochure, it says, now that the decision has been made, that I was going to work tirelessly to make that the best thing for our community. So, fast forward, now it comes time where NCTD is supposed to move forward with the grade separation. They came to me, and I'll never forget the meeting, and sat me down and said, you know, we have these other projects that we want to do, and we want to do them ahead of the grade separation in Solana Beach. We just want to let you know that that's going to happen. And I believe I was the chair of the North County Transit at the time, and this is staff members coming to me and said, you know, you have one community in all of North Coast, one community that has been behind the railroad, that hasn't sued us, you know, and given us public problems, and that's Solana Beach. You don't want them again have a problem with you, and you don't want to have me have a problem with you either. So drop the subject, and at that point it was dropped. I went on with Marion and others to raise the money, the $20 million. And I have to tell you, I missed 2 meetings in the 20 years on the city council, only 2. One is that I was in, I believe I was on the Sandag board and head of transportation, and I was lobbying for funds for the grade separation and other projects, and I missed 1 meeting because I was in Washington, D.C. The second meeting was because I had a heart attack, and I didn't go to 1 meeting. I went to the next one. Anyway, the train station is an integral part of our community. you know, Marion was right, the traffic was going to be a problem. We only have one east-west street in our entire town, and I told them, if you have to do the grade separation. We cannot have our cars backed up all the way up the hill. And I showed them. I had taken pictures and showed the board of directors and staff. We just can't have it. Emergency vehicles that are up at the fire station need to get to the 2,400 residents that are on the west side of Highway 101 and all the myriad of businesses and the 1,100,000 people that use our beaches every year.
No, that's very true, and the train station is a tremendous asset to Solana Beach, thanks to my predecessors. But more recently, it has created some challenges as the state of California becomes more and more involved in trying to resolve the housing crisis and take local authority away from cities in terms of how we grow and develop. For Solana Beach, it's particularly difficult because we have the train station, which is considered a transportation hub. And because it's considered a transportation hub, the state has been very focused on increasing our density and housing numbers, despite the fact that Solana Beach, I believe, is the most densely populated city in North County. And we have more than 50% of our housing is multi-unit family housing already. And we have no vacant land. So we're put in quite a predicament to try and meet the state housing requirements and get the numbers of housing elements added that we are required to add.
I'd like to comment on that. When I was on the council, this is not a new subject. This has been going on for a long period of time. I pointed out to the Sandag board when I was on it, and to other state officials that were in the housing industry or part of the housing government. I pointed out that there are hundreds of people that live on our bluffs, and they're in units that are not single-family homes that are on quarter-acre lots. I mean, these are apartments or condos, and they're there, and we have never really gotten credit for that. Now, it's a quarter of a mile and less to the train station. Now, that's what they want. They want more density around that train station. We already have it, but you've never given us credit for that. And I talked to them blue in the face, and they still haven't realized that that's a problem. And we've already done our share. Now, that doesn't mean that on the parking lot property, I'm going to be upfront and honest with you, that we may have some housing down the line. There was an opportunity years ago, which was old news, so we won't go down to that. But and maybe in the future, there may be opportunities on the train station property for those who use the train every day to go places.
The library in our town, it was really, it moved around actually. It could have been on wheels almost because it went from storefront to storefront wherever they found a good lease for it citywide. And it was kind of, interesting. I've never quite run into that kind of arrangement before. And so then it just got to be, wait a minute, we need to find a real place for the library. This doesn't work very well realistically going forward. So, and there were a number of people who also felt very strongly about our library finding a home. And I'll never forget Dick Schwartzlos, who's no longer with us, but he was very much a big supporter. The first an early meeting when we were starting our campaign, and we didn't know how to run a campaign, and we had people help us with the campaign, and Dick got up in one of those meetings, and he said, I know, I want to get my vote in here. I want to put my money here, and I want a library in this town. And he pledged $5,000 that night, just like that. And I thought, boy, if Dick Schwartzlos feels that strongly about it, and let's see what got some other people. Well, that was the impetus for it. Found out later that his wife Phyllis, who's a lovely lady, told me, yeah, I remember that too, because that was my new kitchen money. But there he was. He put his heart and soul into that, and we had a campaign going where people did put their heart and soul in it and just give the money for it, to get it going. In the high school district, we had on their school property, worked out a deal. We had a big sign out there had a big thermometer and how much money we raised and how much we needed. And it all came together almost, but right to the end. I'll tell this one little story. I was talking to somebody at my house, and all of a sudden I got a phone call from the gal who was involved with the campaign and kind of our treasurer for everything. She said, Marion, I got this funny call today. I don't know what to make of it. I said, what do you mean? I've got somebody who called me, and they wanted to know how much money we need to raise yet to get to the top of our goal. And because they had a major donor for it. I said, well, fine. How much do we need? Tell them. And she said, well, I just want to make sure it wasn't just somebody planning a joke or something. I said, well, we'll find out. But so she gave him she figured out the number, and she gave him the number, and the gal said, okay, fine, I'll get back to you very quickly. The next day she called back again and said, okay, we have a donor, but there are some details. It must be anonymous. We have an anonymous person who would like to fund the rest of your outstanding balance. And so she called me back again. I said, that's fine. That's fine. I don't care if it's anonymous or what, but we keep it whatever the donor wants. And that just took that little piece of extra that we needed. And then we had our library funding done, and we all just took a deep breath. And it's been a very successful library, probably one of the only ones here in San Diego County that's a joint use library with the school district. Works very well and very efficiently, and people are very happy with it.
I think in the early days of trying to get the Harbaugh trails settled, people were having fundraisings. Sometimes they were public, but sometimes not. They were just neighbors. And there were quite a few people in the neighborhood I live in, it's across from the water district, that were actually physically involved in holding on to that property so that we could do good things with it. And there were quite a few entities, I can think of a better word, but a few entities that wanted that property. It would make a great hotel, it would make a great, there were all kinds of aspirations out there for that property. And I remember going to fundraisings, and we weren't even sure how the money was going to come together because it was a bunch of pieces. It was not one big chunk. It was a whole bunch of pieces that had to come together, and people would match, and it finally did. But there were a bunch of good-hearted managers of that fundraising that I knew, and they didn't want to be named, but they were, sleeves were rolled up, they were in the ground floor, so good people.
I remember back when the grassroots effort for the fundraising was going on, and as Joe stated, the city was very supportive, but the fundraising really came from the residents. And one anecdote that stands out clearly in my mind was that an offer or a price had been agreed upon, and a developer who actually lived in Solana Beach upped the bid. and so the fundraising efforts had to be increased even more. So that was, there were a lot of people interested in that property.
Yeah.
One thing I would tell that student or young person or my younger self is that not everybody's going to be happy with what you do, and in fact, not everybody will accept it or be nice about it, and that people that you may have known for years and years that you consider friends might passionately disagree with what you're doing, and you need to have a thick skin and look at the greater good when it comes to decisions, and that's a hard thing to do.
Not you.
I would say, and I have said this to one of my children, is that the nicest thing in the world is find a small city and one where people get along nicely and make that your home, because it's wonderful. And I mean, you're not gonna like check off everybody off the list, but Solana Beach to me is an excellent example. And Jack and I grew up in a small city. Our parents were not activists, but we decided we wanted to participate, that the democracy is a participation agreement that you are going to get involved with. And so, commissions, councils, anything, handing out popcorn at movie
Right.
night, all those things. They're small things individually, but collectively they lead you toward a good feeling about that small city. So